Have you ever pondered whether your most ordinary daily habits could be quietly chipping away at your brain's health? No, we're not talking about anything extreme here. We're discussing habits that society considers perfectly normal, and some even celebrate as a mark of productivity. Today, we're going to reveal 6 such habits, and I guarantee at least one of them will make you reassess your daily routine entirely. Our brain is an incredibly complex, yet remarkably delicate organ. It's constantly adapting and reshaping itself based on our experiences and lifestyle. This fascinating process is known as neuroplasticity. However, this very adaptability also makes it susceptible to negative influences. What you do today literally shapes the brain you'll be living with tomorrow. Right then, let's talk about the first habit that often seems perfectly innocent: not getting enough sleep. Honestly, who among us hasn't sacrificed a few precious hours of shut-eye for a late night at work, or just to binge-watch a gripping series? We often tell ourselves, "Oh, it's fine, I'll just catch up on the weekend." But that, my dears, is one of the biggest and most dangerous myths we tell ourselves about our incredible brains. Now, picture your brain as a bustling, busy city. All day long, as it keeps you thinking and going, it produces a huge amount of rubbish, nasty toxic proteins, which are just the byproducts of all that activity. And then, when you finally drift off to sleep, a special cleaning crew, a bit like the street sweepers in our city, gets to work. This clever system is called the glymphatic system. During your deep sleep, your brain cells actually shrink a little, opening up tiny channels. Through these channels, your cerebrospinal fluid starts to flow, literally washing away all the rubbish that's built up during the day. It's like a massive spring clean, right down to the cellular level. And here's where it gets really important. One of the main toxins this nighttime cleanup removes is the rather infamous beta amyloid protein. Now, scientists have found a very strong link between the buildup of this particular protein and the development of Alzheimer's disease. So when you regularly skimp on your sleep, you're effectively stopping those cleaners from doing their vital job. The rubbish just keeps piling up, day after day. In the short term, this can show up as that frustrating brain fog, feeling a bit irritable and struggling to concentrate. You know that annoying feeling when you just can't quite find the right word? Well, that's not just simple tiredness. That's your brain, quite literally, struggling to breathe under its own waste. Right then, let's have a little chat about what you're actually putting on your plate. Our second habit, and perhaps one of the hardest to break, is our rather fond relationship with all things sweet and heavily processed. A buttery croissant for breakfast, a healthy fruit yogurt as a snack, or perhaps pizza for dinner. Sound familiar, doesn't it? We often worry about our waistlines or those few extra pounds, but how often do we stop to consider what's actually going on inside our heads? When we tuck into these treats, here's the rather sobering truth. Every single time you eat something loaded with sugar, you're not just feeding your taste buds, you're actually kicking off a significant inflammatory reaction in your body, and crucially, in your brain. Think of it like a small but persistently smouldering fire. It's not a raging inferno that burns you straight away, but rather a slow, insidious blaze that gradually damages everything in its path. And in this particular case, that's your precious brain cells, your neurons, and the delicate blood vessels that work tirelessly to nourish them. It's this very fire, this ongoing inflammation, that is one of the primary culprits behind what many of us refer to as brain fog. You know that feeling, when you're a bit apathetic, can't quite get your thoughts in order, and even the simplest tasks just seem utterly impossible. That's not just laziness or getting old. Oh no. That's your brain screaming an SOS, because all its precious resources are being diverted to fighting off this persistent, low-grade inflammation. And in the long run, following a diet like this dramatically increases your risk of developing dementia. Essentially, every extra slice of cake or biscuit you eat is like adding another tiny brick to a wall that could one day tragically separate you from your own cherished memories. Let's move on to our third silent killer on the list, something we often just shrug off as merely an unavoidable part of modern life. That's chronic stress. I'm not talking about the momentary rush of adrenaline when you're dashing to catch a train. Instead, we're focusing on the persistent, underlying tension stemming from endless deadlines, financial worries, or strained relationships. Your brain doesn't differentiate between a real, physical threat and, say, an angry email from your boss. To your brain, both trigger the same danger signal. In response to this signal, your adrenal glands release the hormone cortisol. In small doses, it's actually helpful, mobilizing your body's resources. But when stress becomes chronic, when it doesn't let up, cortisol levels stay elevated. And that's where the real damage begins. Excess cortisol is toxic to a crucial area of your brain, the hippocampus. The hippocampus is our brain's main control center for memory and learning. Think of it like a gardener, nurturing new memories and tending to old ones. Well, for this gardener, cortisol is like acid rain. It damages and destroys neural connections, and in the long term, it can actually cause the hippocampus to literally shrink in size, to wither away. That's why, during periods of intense stress, we find it so difficult to learn new things and so easy to forget old ones. We're not just tired or stressed out. Our brain is experiencing real physical damage. And now, for our fourth habit, one that, in this digital age, has become a veritable epidemic: social isolation. I'm not talking about hermits or those who deliberately choose to live in the middle of nowhere. No, I'm talking about you and me, surrounded by thousands of friends online, yet often feeling profoundly lonely. Even if you're an introvert and recharge your batteries in solitude, a complete lack of face-to-face interaction is a serious red flag for your brain. You see, our brains are fundamentally social organs. Millions of years of evolution have ingrained in them the understanding that being part of a group means safety, whereas being alone can often spell danger. When we go for extended periods without face-to-face contact, our brains switch into survival mode. They begin to perceive the world as a more hostile place, which only perpetuates the chronic stress we've already touched upon. But there's more to it than that. Face-to-face conversation is arguably the finest and most comprehensive workout your brain can get. During a simple chat, you're simultaneously engaging dozens of different areas. You're listening and analysing speech, reading non-verbal cues, activating memory centres to recall relevant information, and engaging your prefrontal cortex to formulate your reply. It's a genuine gym session for your neurons. By depriving yourself of this, you're denying your brain the vital stimulation it needs, and it, much like a muscle without exercise, will gradually begin to atrophy. Next on our list, the fifth habit, is one that's quite literally at our fingertips. This is the endless, mindless scrolling through social media feeds. We often justify this by telling ourselves we're just relaxing, clearing our minds, or simply killing 5 minutes. But the truth is, we're not truly resting at all. Instead, we're actually driving our brains into one of the most insidious traps of the modern world. You see, your brain absolutely craves novelty, and social media feeds are an endless conveyor belt of new information. Every post, every video, every like, each one delivers a tiny burst of dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical. Your brain gets its quick reward and instantly craves more. It's essentially fast food for your neurons. Quick, pleasant, highly addictive, but utterly lacking in intellectual nourishment. And this is where the real danger lies. A brain accustomed to this passive consumption of short, sharp stimuli gradually loses its capacity for deep, sustained concentration. Imagine training a muscle only with short, jerky movements. It would become completely incapable of long, sustained effort. As a result, reading more than a few pages of a book, watching a complex film without constant interruptions, or fully immersing yourself in a work task becomes a genuine struggle. You are, in essence, training your own brain to be superficial and easily distracted. And now, for the sixth habit, one that often masquerades as intense intellectual pursuit. We're talking about a sedentary lifestyle. You might spend hours solving complex problems, writing code, or diligently studying new languages, convinced you're giving your brain a rigorous workout. But if your body remains mostly stationary during all this, you're actually doing your most vital organ a serious disservice. Consider this for a moment. An adult human brain weighs only about 2% of your total body weight, yet it greedily consumes up to 20% of all the oxygen and glucose that enter your body. It truly is an incredibly hungry organ. And who's responsible for delivering all this essential food to it? That's right, our trusty circulatory system. When you sit for hours on end, your blood circulation inevitably slows down. As a result, less oxygen and fewer vital nutrients reach your brain. Imagine trying to power a high-performance sports car with incredibly poor quality fuel. It might sputter along, but it certainly won't run smoothly or perform at its best, will it? But there's another, perhaps even deeper, mechanism at play. During physical activity, our bodies produce a very special substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF for short. Scientists often refer to it as fertilizer for our neurons. This remarkable protein stimulates the growth of brand new nerve cells, strengthens the existing connections between them, and actively helps protect your brain from the effects of aging. By choosing to sit still, you are, quite frankly, depriving your brain of this crucial fertilizer, effectively condemning it to a slow and steady decline. Let's delve a little deeper into the issue of not getting enough sleep, because there's a very common and rather dangerous myth lurking here. Many sincerely believe they can make up for lost sleep on the weekends. They work themselves to the bone for 5 days, getting by on 5 hours of sleep, and then on Saturday, simply lounge in bed until midday, thinking all is well and balanced again. Unfortunately, that's not how your brain operates. Just imagine for a moment you've missed taking an important dose of medication. You wouldn't take a double dose the next day to compensate, would you? Well, it's much the same story with your brain. Your glymphatic system, think of it as your brain's very own internal cleaning crew, operates on a strict nighttime schedule. Every missed shift for this system is, unfortunately, an irreplaceable loss. The toxins that aren't properly flushed out don't simply vanish into thin air. They remain, and worse, they accumulate. What's more, trying to sleep in to make up for lost time actually throws your internal body clock, or circadian rhythms, completely out of whack. The result? Come Sunday evening, you'll find it harder to drift off to sleep, and you'll begin your new working week already feeling sleep-deprived. It becomes a rather vicious cycle, doesn't it? So, your brain isn't like a bank account where you can simply pay off a debt. No, it's much more like a delicate garden that truly thrives on daily, consistent care. Now let's circle back to stress, but this time from another, quite bothersome perspective. We already know that chronic stress damages the hippocampus, but there's another insidious effect. It quite literally switches off the most developed and human part of our brain. I'm talking about the prefrontal cortex. Think of the prefrontal cortex as our brain's internal CEO. It's responsible for planning, making well-considered decisions, self-control, and rational thought. When the brain is in fight or flight mode triggered by stress, it essentially decides there's no time for lengthy contemplation. It needs to act quickly, instinctively, so it redirects all resources away from the thinking prefrontal cortex and towards more primitive emotional centers, like the amygdala. So, what's the practical upshot of all this? Well, it means that under stress, we become more impulsive, irritable, and prone to taking risks. That's precisely why, after a particularly trying day, we're more likely to snap at loved ones, reach for unhealthy food, alcohol, or perhaps spend money without thinking. Our internal CEO is temporarily off duty, and we start making poor decisions that only exacerbate the stress, thus completing this vicious cycle. But which of these factors is the most insidious? Lack of sleep, stress, sugar? Well, here's the real twist in the tale. The most damaging habit, the one that slowly erodes your brain health, isn't just one of these things on its own. It's their combination, all working together on autopilot. It's the habit of not really noticing how you're living your life. When you're sleep deprived, you reach for something sweet for a quick energy boost. That sugar rush then often sparks anxiety, piling on even more stress. And when you're stressed, you don't have the energy for a chat with friends or a bit of exercise, so you end up mindlessly scrolling through your phone for hours. These aren't 6 separate problems, you see. They're one giant system, a vicious circle that feels impossible to break free from. Realizing that these habits are all interconnected and feed into each other, that's the absolute first and most important step to getting your brain back on track. Ultimately, it all boils down to being more mindful. Your brain, bless it, has an amazing capacity to recover if you just give it a fair chance. You don't need to change everything all at once. Just start small. Perhaps get to bed 15 minutes earlier, swap one dessert for a piece of fruit, or walk that short distance instead of hopping on the bus. These little steps over time will slowly but surely dismantle that unpleasant cycle. Well, thank you very much for sticking with me and watching right to the end. If you found any of this useful, do give it a like and perhaps subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on what's next. And now, a question for you. Which of these habits did you find most surprising, or perhaps most relevant to your own life? Do share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a good discussion.